It has been called the last of the great Gilded Age mansions in the United States. Hi everyone, Ken here. Welcome to This House. Today, we are exploring Carolands near San Francisco's Bay Area. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode of This House. In 1869, Harriett Pullman was born to an extremely wealthy family. Her father, George Pullman, was a successful industrialist and engineer who invented the Pullman sleeping car and established the company town of Pullman, Illinois. Harriett grew up in Chicago during the height of the Gilded Age in her father's mansion. For her wedding, George had a massive addition added onto the house, including a 40-foot wide glass dome under which she tied the knot with Frances Carolan in 1892. Just a few years later, in 1897, George passed away, leaving Harriett with a trust in the amount of $1 million, or the modern-day equivalent of about $35 million. The young couple lived out their first married years in Burlingame, California, in a house known as Crossways Farm. Harriett let her money gain interest for some time. Then, in 1912, she began buying up land in Hillsborough, California. Overall, she acquired 554 acres, portions of which included sweeping views of San Francisco's Bay Area. Now that she had a dream location, it was time to plan her dream house. She hired architect Ernest-Paul Sanson to design for her a stately mansion in the Beaux-Arts style. He was in his late 70s at the time and living in Paris, so he never traveled to the United States to oversee the construction of the mansion, relying instead on a local architect to correspond with him and interpret his drawings for the site. By the time the mansion was finished, it boasted over 46,000 square feet with 98 rooms spread across 4.5 floors. At its base, it was surrounded by a dry moat to allow light to flood the lower levels. The walls were built from brick and covered over in scored concrete to give the illusion of a limestone facade. Though the landscape architect, Achille Duchesne, had planned for a driveway to wind for miles through the estate, a more straightforward approach ended up being built with perfectly manicured gardens surrounding the house, which were modeled after the gardens of the Palace of Versailles. Walking inside, passing below a stone archway, you would be greeted by a bifurcated staircase, gracefully flaring above the marble floors. Looking up, an atrium surrounded by columns rose 2 floors to support a dome with a square base, punctured by skylights. Several architectural elements, including entire 17th century rooms, were transported from Europe and reassembled in the house, such as this one with gilded wall panels surrounding a crystal chandelier suspended from an elaborate plaster medallion above a radial chevron floor. The dining room was finished out with wall panels accented by fluted columns and decorated with tapestries, below a peaceful mural of a cloudy sky floating overhead. Continuing through the house, you would encounter built-in bookshelves run below a mezzanine with overstuffed furniture resting on complex parquet floors. The music room continued this theme, though it was planned to have plain walls, directing guest attention towards the stage where a grand piano rests, simply framed by columns and curtains. Now that the house had been completed, Harriett and Frances moved in during the fall of 1916, but by the following year, the couple had separated. Harriett moved to New York, leaving Frank behind in California. The two were unable to finalize their divorce because Frances died shortly after the separation. In 1925, Harriett remarried, and over the next few years, she emptied the house of its furnishings and placed the house up for sale. It sat abandoned for decades, unable to find a buyer. The U.S. government considered purchasing it to use as the West Coast White House, but a budget could not be agreed on. Finally, in 1945, the estate was sold to the Mosley family, but it had fallen into a state of disrepair from being neglected for over 20 years. They began subdividing the land until the house sat on only 25 acres. They had considered demolishing the house before placing it up for sale again. At this time, in 1950, it caught the eye of Countess Lillian Remillard Dandini. She fell in love with the architecture and felt compelled to preserve the house. She began extensive restoration work and opened the house for various charitable and academic events. Upon her death in 1973, she willed the house to the city, but without an endowment to maintain the estate, the city declined. Every few years after that, the house changed ownership, with most of its owners letting the house slip into foreclosure, being repurchased at auctions over and over again, until 1991, when Dr. Ann Johnson visited the house for a charity event. She was overwhelmed by the beauty of the architecture and could not stop imagining how exquisite the house could be if it were to be fully restored once again. Later on, in 1998, the house was placed on the market one last time, and she purchased it. Together with her husband, billionaire Charles Bartlett Johnson, the couple began restoring the mansion, including its mechanical systems. After 14 years of meticulous work, they donated the estate to the Carolands Foundation. Today, the house is open to the public for complimentary guided tours by reservation only. Which room was your favorite? Let me know down below in the comment section. And while you're there, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode of This House. I would also like to say a very special thank you to our This House supporters whose names you can see on screen right now. If you would like to see your name on the screen and show the world your support for the production of these videos, join our membership program today. I'll see you next time on This House.